Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the AIM Search podcast, the podcast where I'm fortunate enough to interview founders of innovative companies and unpack the inspiring stories behind their businesses. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Ricky Doyle, the founder and CEO of Day One, a disruptive recruitment technology platform which is disrupting the technology recruitment space. Ricky, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Really happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm glad to have you on and excited to uncover your story, Ricky. For those of you who don't already know Ricky, can you please begin by giving the listeners a bit of an insight into you and your background, please?
Sure. I won't go back too far and bore everyone with my childhood stories. Just, I guess, my entry into business, I'll kind of go back then. Back in 2006, I was working as an infrastructure engineer within a corporate environment. I had a young engineer come to me and ask me how to do some practical IT tasks, and literally had this light bulb moment where I thought, you know what, I wonder if we built like a mini corporate network. If we solve a couple of problems. One, we de-risk the company's network by isolating training, but more importantly, we give these young engineers the ability to develop their practical skills. So I started that business it was an ed tech platform in 2006. The first 6 years of that business, I don't remember what we did, David. We worked a lot, and I remember that much. And as I said to you when we met before, is every cliche that a tech founder goes through, we had from running the first servers in my garage to eating pizza and drinking beer, trying to fix these problems. All those kind of cliches existed, but we never made any money, but we hung in there for the best part of 5 or 6 years, and then got our break. We were very much two techies. Yeah, we knew how to build it, we just didn't know how to sell it, and we had to learn those skills pretty quickly. But we were fortunate to not necessarily crack the code, but at least loosen the grip on our financial constraints by making a few friends, and we were fortunate enough to exit that business in 2021. And it was a great story and lots of amazing memories and people along the way. I call it the 15-year MBA program that I was on.
Love that.
And then went from there to a couple of other startups that I helped found and involved in a couple of angel investments, and then started Day One. Well, came up with the idea about 18 months ago and officially started in the beginning of last year, January 2024.
Well, thanks for that introduction. Sorry, I'm probably going to have to take you back a little bit further here, because I think I love the story of Day One and the meaning behind it. Could you take us back a little bit further from when you kind of came over from South Africa? You started from when you were already an infrastructure engineer, but I think to fully understand the reason behind the name and, the mission, we probably need to go back a little bit further. So talk to us about the significance of the name Day One, and when was your Day One?
No, look, I appreciate you allowing me to indulge the viewers and listeners in that. I think like a lot of people, when I was at school, and I won't spend too much time on this, but it wasn't really clear what I wanted to do. I had aspirations of becoming a Formula One racing driver. I was involved in motor racing, go-karts, and that's all I wanted to be. I didn't care about anything else. School was an arbitrary side hustle while I was earning my stripes to become a racing driver. And ended up leaving school at 16. Then I came overseas. And realized qualifications were somewhat important because I come from a different country, back to the UK. Fortunately, my grandparents and mother were from the UK, so I had an affinity with England, but still no background. No one took me on. So I had to start my working life at 17 as a labourer, and I worked on a golf course near where we lived, and I dug holes and trenches and cut grass and did those types of things. Then actually got back into this motor racing piece for a while as a mechanic and had some great experiences there. But that I never seemed to catch back up to these kind of aspirations. The Formula One dream got further and further away, and real life kind of set in. And I guess for the best part of 10 years had knocked around between either golf courses, restaurants as a waiter, bartender, living in London, out of London, doing some traveling. In mid-20s, I get this opportunity to go back to South Africa, actually, to do a Microsoft certification. To be honest with you, I wasn't really that interested in technology per se. It was more a case of Y2K was coming, so I thought I'd better have some, I call them inverted commas, computer skills. So I went to a couple of different colleges to do the training. The first one, after doing the aptitude test, said, Ricky, you definitely shouldn't get into IT. You're not a logical thinker, which was fine. Because I didn't want to get into IT in any case. So I was telling myself. And then went to the second college, and the criteria was, can you pay the fees? And actually I couldn't, but fortunately I had a friend who loaned me the money. Anyway, so I started my journey there. Went through this course, and at the end of the course, which is relevant to the question you asked me, was in my mind I was just going back to the golf course. I learned some computer skills again, as I refer to them, to maybe program the irrigation system a little bit better, maybe plan the fertilizer program in a spreadsheet a little bit more effectively. But maybe that was just me putting a barrier up. No, I didn't know how to get into the office environment. So fortunately, the lady who ran that college got a call from one of the local banks, and they said, look, we're looking for a junior engineer. Do you know someone? And I guess out of all the students there, maybe I was a little bit older, but having spoken to her subsequently to this, I bumped into her again. Yeah, I think the biggest gift she gave me is she saw something in me that maybe I hadn't seen in myself. So out of all the students she could have chosen, she calls me into office and she says, Ricky, I have got a job for you. I want to make this clear as well. It wasn't like a social connection, because I think a lot of these things also are brokered through social connection.
Yeah.
My parents' friend has a business, and and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the way the world works. It wasn't that type of relationship with Sharon. And she said, look, I see something in you. I can't give you a job, but I can give you an opportunity to go to an interview. And I was like, wow, of course. And that was kind of my day one to transition from this world that I'd always been in for the last 10 years into kind of this professional career that changed my whole professional life and personal life to a degree, well, not to a degree, majorly impacted my personal life as well. Gave me this pathway to, I suppose, earn more money, have different experiences. But that was always in me, this day one, and I couldn't express it to you. If you had met me 5 or 6 years ago, I couldn't give you this story, because I only realized it when I was thinking about, I want to start another business, what should I do? And all these kind of things inside me, it came together to this, hey, do you remember that time someone gave you this opportunity? Do you think you could do it to others?
So Sharon gave you your day one. She brokered the introduction for this infrastructure engineer role with the local bank, and now your mission, not taking words out of your mouth, that your mission with day one is you want to provide those same opportunities to young and aspiring, well, not even just young, but aspiring technology, people trying to break into the technology sector. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's the essence of it. Is how do we become the enabler? And my job is to pay it forward in some respects. And I managed to do that many times at Practice Labs, my last business. But there seems to be this gap, and when I reflect on why day one came about, when I got into IT, I told you it was Y2K. The world was going to end, the planes were going to fall out the sky, every piece of technology was going to come to a halt, and there was this massive surge. So we had a big skills gap. So there was this massive surge in getting people skilled to go and solve this problem. We managed. The clock struck 12, and 2000 arrived, and all the planes were still in the air, and everything was still operating as it should be. But the kind of point of that is, when I was sat thinking of what next, I think I had heard a skills gap. There's big talk around the skills gap, and look, skills gaps always come and go because technology always evolves. But I think we're talking about a more broad skills gap challenge. I thought, you know what? I can't believe we still have the same problem. I know talent exists, because at Practice Labs we'd put 1 million people on our platform to develop those practical skills. So I knew good people were out there who were prepared to go over and beyond. I think that the challenge is just bridging this gap between the blue collar worker, as I call myself, into this professional white collar world. And I think that sometimes becomes a challenge, and it's not a capability thing, it's a confidence thing. I don't believe I exist. My barrier was, well, I don't even want to work there because I'm going back to the golf course and doing my thing. But it just needs to be, I need an enabler, and Sharon was my enabler for my day one. And that's, for me, it's not necessarily just those that are looking to get into these tech and digital roles. We'd love to do it much more broadly. That's a starting point for us. But being the conduit between talent that that is capable, maybe not as confident as they should be, matching them to companies who need this talent. And yeah, it's not as simplistic as that, but that's the essence of it. How do we bring those two things together in, you used the words earlier, disruptive, in a disruptive way, just because I think when you consider recruitment as a sector, is probably, my personal opinion, it's probably not as sophisticated as it should be. It's still fixed in these preconceived ideas of how one should post a job, how one should apply for a job, how one should go to the interview, how you should conduct yourself in the interview, and all these things. And actually there's a misalignment between both parties, and actually how do you soften that out and actually make it more accessible to a broader group.
Yeah, I find it fascinating you talk about there being a skills gap, and it's something, I mean, obviously I've not been in the recruitment or the tech spaces as long as you have, but I know as long as I was in tech recruitment, there was always a skills gap. And, through speaking to highly qualified candidates on a daily basis, you realize, well, no, the talent's out there. The issue quite often is at the application or the screening process. It's, as a specialist, recruitment consultant, being able to read between the lines of what do you actually look for in a person, because particularly now with AI and the ability for people to write their CVs, which ticks all the boxes on the job descriptions and stuff like that, and anyone can do it that can use Chat GPT, for example. I think the value of actually being able to read between the lines and understand what is it that actually is going to make this person successful. And I think the duty on a recruiter or recruitment platform of empowering the people of, you might not tick all these boxes, you might not feel confident or feel that you're ready to call yourself a specialist or a whatever, but I can assure you, because of X, Y, and Z, you are the right person, for this role. And so I'd love to, dive in a little bit more to the Day One platform and understand how you are, acting as that enabler to these young and incoming tech professionals.
Yeah, and I just wanted to just go back just a little bit. When you're right to kind of say some of the barrier probably existed, excuse me, from a recruitment perspective, is when we look at job descriptions. I think companies use that as a risk mitigation tactic. So like, if I put a really extensive job description together with all these requirements around skills, if I can get someone to match more closely to that from their CV perspective, I'm de-risking the process. But really you're not, because as we kind of highlighted, like a really good CV will probably align those things in any case, whether they are legitimate or not. So, but I think what that becomes a barrier for as well are people who, and I think statistically this is proven, even if you just look between the genders, if I'm not mistaken, women will want to have something like, feel confident to apply for that role only if they have at least 80% of those skills. If they don't, they won't apply. Men will probably look, at a lower category. Well, I'll have a go at that and see where it exists.
I have the majority.
Exactly. Yeah, I could probably do that. And that's not trying to sway one way or the other, but I think what it leads to is people not applying for the role, that talent. So how do you do that? And segueing to what we're trying to do at Day One is trying to remove the need for a CV, because I truly believe people are more than the sums of their CV. And if you're really good at it and you have the tools, great CVs look great, but I think now are becoming less trustworthy. But even if like we go back before any kind of AI components were used in this space, sometimes people who are not as confident will not write as good a CV. That's just the reality of it. So how do you level the playing field a little bit? So what we've decided to do is let's remove the need for a CV, and let's start to rephrase these things, and dare I say, humanize it, as opposed to going too technology driven. Humanize it to some extent. So when we talk about your background, from our perspective, how do you remove some of the halo effect? So we don't kind of ask where you worked previously, what school you went to, because I think those two things have a tendency to sway decision making through. And I think when we chatted last time, sometimes you have to filter somehow, because there's too many CVs. So you might look at this person and go, well, they've worked in the public sector for 5 years. They'll never manage in a private business, So they automatically rejected, but actually they may be the best person. So what we're trying to do is remove some of those biases on selection. Actually ask you, what are your values? Because I think that's a very important question. You know, understanding someone's values means you can understand whether they're a good fit for your organization or not. What are their aspirations? What are they striving to try and do? What are they running towards as opposed to running away from? And then the final thing is the essence of the being. You know, what makes you you? And you know, when you combine that together, as now you have the individual, forget about their name or where they've worked and what school they've gone to, but this is what they're about. And then you actually say, what can you do? So we've gone, you don't have to second guess this and maybe do an assessment, a work-based assessment, which is based on knowledge. It's more about how can you, if you were going to work on Monday, your day one, are you able to do just the basic stuff as an information worker, a digital information worker? Can you open email? Can you work in a spreadsheet? Can you use Word? You know, these things. Can you actually utilize AI companions now to write some prompts? You don't have to be a very sophisticated prompt engineer, but can you use this in your productivity skill set or tool set to do a day one job? So there's that component, there's a technical component to it. And the final thing is, yeah, I would love to know the stats, and no one would ever be able to measure this, how many people we lose through first time interviews being not confident to express yourself. So we have this AI interviewing component, and it's not to trick anyone. We're not measuring a score. In actual fact, it just becomes a practice element for you. So you're talking to the AI avatars you would in a normal interview, but it actually coaches you with some feedback so that when you do have your in-person interview, you've done it a couple of times, you can go into that meeting feeling a bit more confident. That's kind of our baseline of what we're trying to do. So it's trying to remove the need of a CV, save time. So like a three thing, like any business, yeah. How can we save you some time that we've pre-screened and verified the skills of the individuals? Time and money are closely linked. So you know, how do we give you some time back so you can focus on doing what you are really good at and not the heavy lifting work? And the probably the most important thing is, how do we improve the quality of the candidates coming to your role? And by completing these components up front, you're demonstrating two things. One, they are capable, but two, they are motivated to work, because they're not just easy applying. They're not just clicking a button, I want to apply for your opportunity. You know, again, why we're trying to think slightly differently is not, you have to demonstrate, I have to do something to get something. And if I've invested an hour to an hour and a half as a talent ID into preparing myself, that already shows to any employer, this is someone I would be interested in speaking to, irrespective, because they're not, I'm in control. We kind of give the control back to the employers to say, you connect with the talent you want, and talent has an opportunity to actually go, you know, this is a company I want to work with. So when both parties are choosing to communicate, it's already more effective, isn't it? It's not this imbalance in the relationship, because I think there's always an imbalance in some respects, like, oh my gosh, I need a job. The employers always tend to have the upper hand in that, and the good ones try and bring the parity back in and ensure that there's a fair and equitable chance of getting the job. But those that don't, keep the imbalance there, and it continues always, and you never get the most from the individual, because there's always this imbalance of power. Anyway, that's what we're trying to do, is level the playing field, improve the quality, save some time. Even from the talent side, is instead of applying for 20 different jobs, once you've done your profile, you are automatically, you know, pre-qualified for any other opportunity that comes into the platform.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple of things you mentioned there that I wanted to kind of pick up on, and one of them was you were talking about yourself going from kind of being a blue collar worker to white collar. I think we mentioned it on a previous conversation, but the podcast has actually gone out. One of the ladies I was recently interviewed on my podcast, Corinna, built a chatbot to kind of address the problem in the German market of, 70+% of the workforce are blue collar workers, but, they don't own CVs, they weren't on LinkedIn, and there was no recruiters kind of meeting the candidates where they're at. And through creating this chatbot, engaging with people, not forcing that 70+% of the workforce to adapt to the modern ways, write CVs and whatever. It was meeting the candidates where they're at. And it sounds like, you come over that or help overcome that inertia and that anxiety for people that maybe aren't used to writing CVs. Maybe they've been in this blue collar space where typically it might have been local job ads. It could have been various other things that they've been able to apply to. It might be word of mouth, it might be nepotism, as you kind of mentioned. It could be a friend of a friend of a friend has introduced them to someone. All of a sudden you're making it a bit more of a seamless transition into maybe white collar work into this tech space. Meanwhile, also overcoming a lot of the biases. Something we kind of spoke about before with hiring managers and stuff. You mentioned the halo effect, but also there are so many, and having worked in recruitment for quite a long time, you realize when you speak to hiring managers that, no, I don't like him or her. Why? Because they worked at this company or that company, have had a bad experience with the team there. And it could just be like an ego thing, like a company's in the news and, they've grown some lofty valuation, but actually this hiring manager thinks that their technology's, pardon the French, crap. Yeah. And she's a bit jealous. And so all these things as a recruiter, you can't account for. Actually, it sounds like the Day One platform is removing all these sort of biases, so you're just being purely objective.
Yeah, and I think it helps. Look, we will never be perfect because you can't control people's thought processes. Excuse me. But look, people always ask me, well, what are you trying to do at Day One? Are you trying to get more people employed? Are you trying? And absolutely, that's our goal. When, again, I go back to the beginning of this journey with Day One, I wanted us to have impact or start a business that had impact and purpose and changing people's lives. You said go back to your really start why Day One. That opportunity to take a person like Ricky Doyle and transition them into a different journey, like really inspires me to want to do that. 100, 1,000, 100,000, a million times. I'd love for us to have that impact on the world, and we will work every day to try and get there. But that aside, when I kind of really think about it and go, what is our job? My feeling is our job is to actually get more people to the starting point and not be eliminated too early because of exactly what you said. I don't like where they worked before. For employees, we go, here's all this talent that could do this job. You don't have to do the selection piece of they work for this company I don't like. Here's everyone that we think is a great match. Now when you speak to them, I'm hoping the mindset changes from, this is my own view. When we kind of hire, we're looking for a reason not to hire the person because we don't want to make a bad hire. So you kind of naturally, not trying to catch them out, you're trying to be objective, but there's this internal conflict of going, well, what happens if the next person's better? So what I've really got to concentrate to see why I wouldn't hire this one versus the next person that comes in. So how do we overcome some of that and change the mindset of, I know you are capable of doing this job. Now I want to find out, would you be the best fit for us and would we be the best fit for you? And that's just a mindset shift in being this positive, looking some of our socials, looking at the value of a good hire. Because I know you can do the job. Now I want to find, why would you be a good hire for our company? And that's a very positive way of looking at it as opposed to that negative, the value, like the cost of a bad hire. Oh my gosh, if I get this wrong, I'm going to be in trouble. Hopefully we've taken care of some of those things, but you've got this pool that really find the best person for you, as opposed to maybe arriving with 2 or 3 through a selection process, through CVs, and even support. And this is not to discredit recruiters. They've done a great job and they exist for a reason. But in partnership, how do you bring the best people, more really good people to the table, and you're not left just choosing from 3? And actually, the three of them, they weren't great, but we'll choose the one that's the closest fit to us. But it would be great to see another 7 or 10 people. That's really what I'm trying to achieve, is get more people to the starting point.
Yeah. And Ricky, remind me, was it you that was telling me about the origins of the CV?
No, I don't believe so. But
So maybe it was someone else, but I heard the other day that supposedly the CV was created by Leonardo da Vinci, way back when,
right.
when people were, turning up for job interviews and they were sort of verbally sort of saying what they used to do and what their background was. So the CV was created as a way of, being able to kind of go around and say, hey, look, this is what I've done, almost like a certificate. And you think, I don't know when specifically that was sort of developed, but it goes to show how kind of old that mechanism or that system of, presenting your work history is. And you think how much disruption there's been in the working world, that we're still relying on this archaic system for basically saying this is what I do. And with the reason why I thought this was relevant is like with the proliferation of AI and how so many people with very basic skills are able to write the perfect CV. Mechanisms of filtering what is, I read a statistic the other day saying 1 in 4 job applicants is a deep fake. And they've probably written the best CVs. So if you're just relying on manual or internal TA teams or recruiters, the best candidates often will be fake ones. And I guess having a system like Day One, fake candidates and deep fakes will not be engaging with your screening interviews and whatnot. So it's also probably a very good way of filtering out these deep fake candidates because they probably won't be able to engage and go through the processes, I'm presuming.
Yeah, you're right. And you know what? I've never really considered that as a benefit, but thanks for that. But yeah, these things, we can't change the world. We can only make it a little better, and I think everyone's kind of trapped when you look in this world. Like if you just take a step back and we're objective. And we can look at all the problems. The problems are always easy to identify. The solutions are difficult. But, we kind of have, in sorts of the economy, we talked about it just before the call. It's a tough operating environment out there. Everyone's under pressure. So you've got candidates who are desperate for jobs, really trying to make it happen. You've got companies with, really, who are caught in a news cycle of don't hire, whether it's both, it works both ways. Don't hire experienced people because you can get AI to do it. Don't hire less experienced, early career because you could get an AI agent to do it. So no one really knows what to do. And I guess you're sitting in a company going, I don't want to make the wrong choice here. So a lot of the stuff just slows down and becomes more difficult. And I think we can all understand that. But there's lots of tools out there. Then, of course, technology starts to take over. And we've got 100, 250, over 300 different ATS systems. And they've got the HRIS platforms trying to do a little bit of recruitment plus doing what they're doing. And then ATS are doing a little bit of it. And it just becomes this noise. So you look at companies, it's difficult for them. And no one should take the blame. It's just, I think, the situation we found ourselves in. So can we help to make it a little bit better, hopefully? But the whole thing needs a collective. And I think there's a lot of good companies out there with some great technology, like the lady you mentioned, who are going, how do we target maybe different groups to enable them to get into the workforce again? Whether blue collar, white collar, doesn't matter, but just doing it in a different way. And maybe if there was one message, it's to people who are recruiting, whether it's a startup where it's owner led and they're making all the decisions, through to these big corporates with big teams, talent acquisition teams. It's maybe accepting that what we have right now is not working and embracing a different mindset to fix some of the problems. And there's lots of tools out there that is not a day one pitch, but there are lots of tools out there, but it's finding the right tool for your business to become an enabler to solve the problem and not just stop and go, oh my gosh, there's too much out there. I don't know what to do. But all that means is the technologists like us out there go, oh, there's another problem for us to solve. Here's another piece of technology to go and fix the problem. And that actually doesn't really solve it. It's a little bit of support, maybe. It's technology with people support to help transition the bridge to actually doing it just in a better way.
One thing I think was fantastic there, and I really appreciate you kept referencing or mentioning tool. What I really like and resonated on our initial call is positioning Day One as a tool, as a platform with a specific use case. I think, as I mentioned to you before, the amount of demos and the amount of founders I've spoken to are trying to be everything to everyone, and they're trying to offer an end-to-end recruitment solution for startups, for large enterprises. And, people need different things. I've spoken with a bunch of founders who said we've just, implemented a new ATS system. We've, rolled out a new CRM, and they have all these AI capabilities. And it's like, well, actually, if I plug in, one of these other tools or solutions with any of my partners, that's going to overlap. So I'm actively kind of selling against, some of us, because I'm saying if we implement this system, you're going to be just duplicating spend on. You've got an ATS system, a CRM, and supposedly this end-to-end recruitment solution. Just because you need delivery support, you're spending on 3 different softwares that have so many overlapping features. So talk to us specifically then about Day One. Who's Day One for, and who gets the most benefit? Who's your sort of ideal client or customer? Who can you support the most?
Yeah, and again, this is driven by my own experience. So rightly or wrongly, I kind of feel we fit really well in this kind of 5 to 250 employees. That's where You're kind of looking to grow the organization, but not maybe in a slightly different way because you can't compete with the big corporates, so you have to think about it a little bit differently. The partners that we specifically target are those that have a fresh approach to bringing talent in. I have a real key focus on early careers, and again, this is driven from my 15-year MBA program that I mentioned earlier. Was, if you look at that business in particular, and I think it's relevant to a lot of technology businesses, it's the same problem. You bring early stage people in, the company grows, but the person who you brought in is like excellent at the thing that they started with. And you're so reluctant to move them on because just in case, like, you can't break this thing. This is what the business is built on. So you kind of, all you end up doing is the person you brought in, you end up paying them more money, but they could be so much more effective if they moved up in the organization. You're too scared to bring anyone in because you can't trust that they're going to be able to do the same job as the original person you bring. So you've got like this job lock thing that I speak about quite a lot. So what we're trying to do is, could we be a trusted source for bringing this early careers in that they can do the same job because we verify they could, and you can allow the original employee to maybe move up in the organization and actually match their aspirations of where they want to go in their career while creating capacity at the entry level part of the business. And if you're doing that the whole time, what it allows you to do is you keep talent with you as you grow, because invariably what happens, if you keep someone locked in at that early stage, you have a gap in the middle, and you have then kind of the executive team and the founders at the top. So what you end up doing is bringing services in or partners to do projects in the middle space. And they come in and they go out. The person that you really value gets frustrated and leaves and goes and finds a job exactly where they wanted to be in the middle space. And they've gone with all this knowledge, and you're having to backfill in any case. So if you allow people to move up in the organization and you have this trusted partner to bring this talent in, and we talk about it in opportunity, it's about not just jobs, because it is an opportunity for someone to come and do some amazing things within your business. And it might be part-time work, it might be an internship, it might be work experience, who knows? But if you have a trusted source of bringing those people in, it allows, I call it the agitator at the bottom, and it allows people to filter up into the middle tier. They stay with you as you grow. And you're filling at the bottom. So long-winded question, answer to the question about who do we fit? Like that, I feel like is our sweet spot, and I think we can add the most value to. But that being said, we've just done a project with some really big organizations who see the value in it. I think the difference with bigger organizations is this: day one is really just a supplemental tool to what they already do. So they already, like, if you look at some of the names, the big, any of the big four or big law firms, they are very sophisticated and actually do a really good job at getting early careers into their business because they're big enough and they can kind of see they need talent pipeline. They're very sophisticated. We just become a supporting role to, here's another avenue for us to find talent from different backgrounds, whatever it may be. But our sweet spot is there. Those companies that want to grow and are prepared probably to take a little bit more, provide more opportunity, because most of these companies will be owner-led, or certainly the founder is still around and went. I remember the days when we won our first deal and someone took a chance on me. We need to pay that forward in some respects.
Yeah, well, a few features of the product is, at least as I understand it, I think would be looking specifically at that kind of earlier stage group when they're not going to have sophisticated or built out, hiring process at all.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where day one can probably add a lot of value. I think when you're looking at larger organizations, and something we've not tapped on, but equally attractive for both smaller organizations but also larger ones, is you mentioned before about the automated kind of email or an engagement with candidates. I think, the kind of aforementioned big four or the big law practices and stuff, their brand is always going to be a strong enough magnet to get candidates to apply. And naturally, you kind of expect an element of ghosting. For smaller companies, I think it's so important that whether the candidate's right or not, it could be right candidate, just wrong time, keeping that level of engagement. And that's where I think the day one platform, being able to send and keep those candidates engaged by providing feedback, providing useful insights, as you mentioned, based on interviews, is going to keep those candidates engaged. So should in 6 months' time we're actually be hiring for a role, and you do fit those skills, candidates aren't going to be put off, hiring, reapplying for that company. So really good from that brand perspective. The last thing we've not really touched on, but when you talk about anonymizing the candidates and removing the need for a CV, I guess for larger organizations, one of the really attractive elements is going to be aligning with their D&I initiatives, right? Can you talk a little bit about that and how you help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, of course, in the modern world become a delicate area. We still fully believe in doing the right thing. And doing the right thing doesn't necessarily mean positively discriminating one way or another. So like my own philosophy on it and how we built it into the platform is, how do you allow someone with no experience, maybe a working parent, would love to change their current situation around their working environment, give them an opportunity to come somewhere that gives them the same chance as someone who maybe has a level of privilege and education. But we don't want to discount that person either. How do we just bring it so both people have got a fair shot at getting that job, and may the best candidate win, the best person who's right for that role win? So from our perspective, is, there's two things we do to ensure that there's a diverse talent pool. So we're not just trying to recruit talent from the big cities. We are trying to look at it across the country. Like, how do we make sure we are attracting talent from different parts of the country? That's number one. So number two, which kind of gives this fair and equitable piece, removing some of the things we've already spoken about, where you've worked previously, if you've worked previously. Because one of the questions we ask is, like, if you're let's say you are, because I love this of the population, if you are a working mother and go back and maybe never worked a formal job before, very hard to put any experience down. But if you actually think about what the skills that individual has, whether male or female, time management, dealing with stress, all these things that you learn that probably are just as relevant to a office-based job, but working in kind of a home environment, are still skills you develop. So for me, diversity, equality, and inclusion is not just about certain demographics. It has to be broader than that. How do we kind of ensure we bring disability into this and those type of things? That being said, so we are active in where we look to bring talent in. One, two, like I say, we kind of try and make it fair and equitable, so we're not skewing one way or the other. And the final thing is that we are capturing these metrics that whether you are a small company who just wants to see how you're doing, you can kind of see what the makeup of the applicants are, or sorry, the talent you have got who match to your role. You can see that without kind of highlighting anyone specifically, a general snapshot of the 20 talent IDs that you have selected for this role make up this different backgrounds. For the bigger organizations, we're starting to do some work with the social mobility index, and there's much more robust reporting requirements on how you're sourcing talent, where you're sourcing it from, do they come from a lower socioeconomic background, etc., etc. So we're trying to cover a broad range of things without it being skewed, and that's the hard part, without skewing it too far to say, hold on a second, someone, I hate to pick on someone went to a Russell Group university should be excluded because they've had privilege. Well, that's nonsense. They may have just got there on merit. They just need the same chance. But at the same other end, I haven't been to university at all. How do we just keep it fair? Like, fair and equitable is probably the statement I prefer to use than skewing it too far one way or another.
No, I love that, and I love the whole story and the mission with Day One, because I think what's fundamentally the difference when I speak to you and when I've spoken to kind of founders of other companies, it's there's a problem that exists in the recruitment space. How can we build a technology that solves that problem? It seems that you've had more real world experience and much more of a vested interest in helping these groups. You keep talking about working mothers, for example, or you've come from a blue collar background, transitioned into white collar, you were given your Day One. And I think because you've had so much more experience and appreciation of the problem that you're trying to solve, it's so much more kind of like thought out, the solution, rather than there's a huge market opportunity in recruitment. Let's design something and put on as many sort of taglines in AI or D&I and all these attention grabbing things. Everything you're saying there, a lot of people think about positive discrimination as being a good thing. We need to get more women, we need to get more ethnic minorities into work and more disability representation. But actually, you're talking about we need the best person to get the job. We need businesses to have the best employees, and we do that by sort of anonymizing the candidate, removing the CVs, removing some of the education background. So I love the story. I love the mission, behind the business. I guess the last kind of question for me is, where do you see the business in sort of 3 to 5 years? You mentioned with your previous business, it was a case of maybe build it and they'll come. And you said it was a 15-year MBA of, actually realizing building this incredible product doesn't necessarily sell itself. So taking the learns from that first business into day one, where do you see the business in the next sort of 3 to 5 years?
It's a great question. For me, like, this is rose-tinted glasses moment, but I do believe the same problem exists everywhere. And I've been fortunate in previous business and just throughout my life being able to travel and see different cultures. The same problem we have here, no, we do have here, exists in Thailand, exists in South Africa and Australia and North America, and even speaking to someone in Brazil. For me, in 5 years, I'd love for us, the long-term rose-tinted glasses view is like when you think of early careers, you think of day one, and you just know, so from both sides, from anyone who's looking to employ early careers talent in tech and digital, day one's your place to go, and it's affordable, it saves you time, but this isn't kind of a zero-sum game of like we want to take over the world. Like there's still a place for everyone, but I'd love for us to be just seen for this legacy brand that actually forget about the next 3 to 5 years, for the next 20 years, I know, like Uber, this might be a stretch, like Uber have changed the idea of a cab. So in the old days, we used to go, oh, we need a cab for that. Now we just go, we need an Uber for it, even if we mean a cab. We need a day one. Like it just means that someone in this early careers, like I'd love for us to be like this legacy brand that helps people across the world for that. It's always fair, but the same thing from the candidate side is, like this brand that fights for you as well, to go, look, I'm from whatever background, but I know if I at least try, if I prepare to go to day one and do the work up front, doesn't matter what my background is, I know I've got a chance of getting something. And irrespective of your background, if everyone believes they've got a chance and we give you a fair chance, then I'm good with that. What will be on the commercial side. Hopefully we're successful, and the more success we have means we can impact more people. But those are the kind of the core things like come from, like help businesses make it nice and easy to bring early careers in, because I really believe that is a need in most businesses, and maybe the most cost-effective way of building a business. And on the candidate side, having somewhere where they once got my back here. I might not get a job, but at least I know there may be an opportunity. And that's all I'm prepared to invest something to maybe get an opportunity.
And I think that's the biggest thing, working in agency recruitment as well, is people don't necessarily care so much for the outcome. It's always hard calling up a candidate saying they didn't get a job that they worked really hard for, and have maybe been through the ringer 8 interviews or so preparing for this, telling them they didn't get the job is the worst part of the role. But people just value that feedback, and they value the advice and the insights. And I think that's what day one does very well. I did say it was the last question, but I noticed in the last day or so you announced another partnership. So talk to me a bit, please, about how important those partners are and what the partners are enabling you to do day one, getting your kind of mission and message out there.
And a lot of the partnerships are on this talent sourcing side. So as I said to you, like we're trying to be very deliberate in who we work with to ensure we're not just taking from the same talent pool. I'm a big believer in partnerships, commercial side, so working with recruiters as much as anything, like how do we get more people employed and more opportunities. So we have to tap into that side. And then the talent sourcing piece is working with these different partners to become the enablers for talent to come in as well. Partnerships are very much part of the framework. I'm a believer in, and I kind of posted about this a couple of times. If you want to go quickly, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. Touching on these elements where I said the industry needs a change and probably more support, those partnerships are even more important to help break the lock that we're in, like because it feels like we're in a bit of a jam, and those partnerships are the enabler for people who are recruiting to kind of have a trusted source to get over the hump. But if we try and fight it alone, I'm not sure if I said this to you last time, I heard this crazy stat the other day. Someone said to me, in the UK, we have as many kind of recruiters, recruitment companies, recruitment technologies as they do in North America. And if you just look at the size of the market, it's like, what do you mean? So it's very fragmented here. very hard to do business because there's so many options. So I think that, so going back to answering your question, David, it's more about, so those partnerships to me are like, how do we build a collective of really good, well-aligned companies that share this mission around doing good and trying to impact people, doing it for the right reasons. We'll never change the whole industry, but actually, could we become a collective of the power or the force of good for both sides, companies and candidates?
As a final thought, I just wanted to echo something you said there, which I loved. Is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think that's brilliant. I love that, and I think it's a nice final thought to end on. So I wanted to thank you, Ricky, for obviously your contribution, you telling the story, and the listeners for tuning in. I'm sure hopefully they've got a better insight into day one, the story behind it. And for those who are keen to, reach out, find out more about you and more about the business, how's best for them to connect with you, Ricky?
Probably easiest on LinkedIn. So Ricky Doyle, have a look at the company page, day one as well. Or I'm sure I'll be, you'll find me somewhere on there. Otherwise, we'll put a link in the episode somewhere.
Amazing. Well, yeah. As soon as the episode goes live, I'll be linking you in as well, and I'm sure people will be keen to connect and find out more about you and the business.
Well, David, thank you for having me. It's been great. I really enjoyed it.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Ricky.
Thank you.